Hey guys, it's Lee Taylor. That's the 2021 refreshed Hyundai i30 in performance, and this is a Right Lane review. The modern hot hatch is full of snap, crackle, and pop. A little bit of a razor-sharp shopper trolley with a personality disorder. And luckily for us, one of the best just had an update. Now I love a fantastic, characterful hatchback, and the i30 was considered an underdog for a long time, but the i30N has proven it can be a really hard competitor against pretty much everyone in the segment. And the i30's had a bit of a refresh, a new face, some chassis tweaks, a brand new dual clutch transmission, and a whole lot of noise. So how's the i30N once you live with it every day? Well, turns out, even without the loud noises, pops and bangs, it's a great little car. It's an i30 package, so you get most of the things you would have gotten in a normal hatch. Blind spot monitors, cross traffic alert front and rear, your blind spot collision avoidance, lane keep assist, not lane centering, and no adaptive cruise control, which is a little bit of a miss for me, but whatever. And overall, particularly in this dual clutch version, the car has become a lot more urban friendly. The i30 I drove a few years ago was, of course, the manual, because the dual clutch only came around this year, and it was just a bit harsh. Full stop all the way around. It didn't matter what mode you're in, it was just a bit harsh. This car doesn't seem quite as harsh. It's more hard-edged than the GTI, but it's not nearly as stiff in normal mode as the Megane, which doesn't have the adaptive dampers that this car has. But you don't drive this car, or you don't buy this car to think about spending its life in traffic. You buy an i30N because it's fun and it's loud and it's aggressive, and we know all about how an i30 drives. I mean, there's 1,000 reviews on that. So let's talk about this car from a different performance perspective. The one we're driving at the moment is the i30N Performance Premium with a sunroof, so it gets the lightweight in performance seats, which are heated, a little bit bigger display, and of course the big panoramic sunroof. And this starts at $52,000 before on-roads. That's a heck of a deal because with on-roads, that makes this car nearly 60. To get a equivalently loaded Megane RS trophy, you're talking nearly 70. To get a equivalently loaded GTI like we were driving a few weeks ago, you're also talking nearly $70,000 with on-roads. So it's a nice niche, and it's significantly cheaper than a lot of its rivals. Some of that can be boiled down to the fact that the interior is a bit crap from like a materials perspective, but you can get over that when you get it up into the mountains or onto some curvy roads. Now overall, the spec sheet hasn't changed that much. It's the same 2-liter turbocharged engine, electronically controlled front differential, adaptive dampers on every corner, upgraded brakes. The tires have changed, so they're a new Pirelli specific tire that Hyundai has commissioned for this particular car. You have the option of this 8-speed wet dual clutch transmission. It's a fantastic transmission. I have to say that it's not quite as snappy as the transmission in the GTI, perhaps, but it from a day-to-day living, I found it actually to be a bit more loving, a bit more easy to live with and deal with, and that's high praise for a dual clutch of any type, because if you can at least be on par with Volkswagen doing well. But chassis-wise, they've done some interesting tuning on the car. So they've adjusted how the dampers react to everything, and they've done some what I would consider to be final touches and buttoning down before this car becomes the new version of the i30, which is due in a couple of years, because we're getting the Kona and the i20 and the i30 sedan, and they are all running a new platform, so the hatch is due an update. So as I said before, the last generation i30 that I drove was a little bit harsh in every single corner. Great car, incredibly impressive, thoroughly impressed, but it just lacked a little bit of something. Very soulful, very playful with this loud exhaust, which I adore as always, but it was just lacking a little bit of something. I can never quite put my finger on it, and maybe it just felt incomplete. This new one, with the adjustments they've done to the dampers, the different wheels and tires, and the little tweaks here and there, the car feels a lot more friendly to you as a driver, and that's an every single instance. Whether you're popping along to the shops or popping up the mountain road at a significant clip like I was earlier this week, you turn the car in, it's incredibly sharp on turn in. The steering's not my favorite. It does lack a little bit of feedback, but it's not terrible. It's very accurate. The back end comes around like it's supposed to. It doesn't play, ass out like some other front wheel drives will, but it's really well buttoned down. It's compliant. It knows exactly what it's supposed to do, and it does it without a beat. And if you drive up the mountain in normal mode, it does it a little bit softer. You drive up the mountain in mode, it's quite sharp and it's incredibly adjustable. No matter what you do with this car, if you take it out to a track day, that's going to be where a car like this is most enjoyed. And it will reward you over and over and over again. And you can adapt so many different portions of the car's life. I mean, there's 3 settings for nearly everything: steering, dampers, exhaust, engine and transmission. There's so many ways you can set this car up and make it your own. And it really makes me wonder about my love for Renault Sport, because I will tell anyone my preferred hot hatch at the moment is a Trophy. But this one makes me think about what I would enjoy out of the Trophy versus this, and it really just boils down to agility and noise. I just like the noise of the Trophy better. Now, like I said before, we were driving the automatic around, but we did have a chance to have the manual out. So now we're in the manual model of the i30N, and as we know, the manual has been the sole option for the car from the get-on up until recently with the addition of the 8-speed dual clutch we were just in. And when you boil it down, there's not a ton of difference between the cars mechanically. So it's the same upgraded damper package, same brake system, same new wheels and tires, same engine, same base car. Interior options are the same, so you can get it in a base trim or a premium trim, no matter if you choose a automatic or a manual option. But when you actually boil these cars down, there's some interesting differences. And there's 2 ones that always stick out to me. One is the noise factor. So one of the reasons we love the i30N is the noises that it makes in the different modes. And I'm driving around in custom at the moment with steering on comfort and the suspension on comfort, but everything else on is loud mode. And you get the pops and bangs on this manual model just like you do on the DCT. And yes, you do get the upshift farts, if you will, from the manual model. From the dual clutch model, but you also get nice little burbles and pops from this manual model. So if I change from first gear to second gear, as we'll see here in a few moments, you get a nice little burble and pop. So we're taking off in first, I go from first to second, a little bit of pop, second to third, another bit of pop. And it's a nice character feel. And that kind of adds the engagement and the excitement of these N cars. But the most interesting difference, I find personally, is when you actually take this car out and press on it a little bit. And you're never going to feel this difference around town. You're just not. You're not going to be able to get the car up on its toes legally in that presence. But I took it out and gave it a proper good working the other day. And I noticed that the front axle feels lighter in this car. And I was thinking about it, and it makes perfect sense. The dual clutch gearbox is quite a heavy unit. There's lots of metal in there sitting over the front axle. It means the front end can't recover and change direction as quickly as it would like. So turn in is slightly affected. And if you want a car that's a bit crisper, and it's minusculely crisper and lighter in the front, the manual is the one to have because the automatic is a bit heavier. But if you want a car that's a bit more user-friendly and around town friendly, the DCT is a pretty good option. And there's a couple of differences between the DCT and the manual besides your obvious. So you have the 6-speed gearbox, or you have an 8-speed automatic. On the wheel, instead of the rev matching button like you've had in the manual for years, you have a in-grid shift button on the automatic, which means you press it and the car suddenly stops pretending that it's a manual transmission as an automatic, and it kind of gives you a pause between the gears and actually just bangs them through like a true sequential and makes the shifts a little bit faster, ultimately making a faster car. It's a bit of a gimmick, but it's kind of cool. I actually like having the rev match button here on the steering wheel because it means I can turn it off, and I like having it off. But beyond that, there's not a lot of difference between them, and it kind of makes me second guess my love for Renault Sport, which is a little bit sacrilegious. Oh, give me the shivers thinking about it. So how's the cockpit on the i30? Well, I have to admit, despite loving this car overall from a driving perspective, the interior does let me down. It feels a bit old and dated, and the materials are just not that great overall. You do sit behind a nice wheel though. It's stitched in the nice blue for in performance. You have the buttons for your drive modes as well as in and custom in mode. Some paddle shifters for the dual clutch gearbox, which I wish were metal, but I'll get over it if they're just plastic. You sit behind a nice easy to read gauge cluster, though it's not digital like in the Kona i30 sedan and i20N models, but you do have most of your information here. It's easy to read. You your shift indicators here as well. Infotainment screen and center stack is skewed away from the driver, pet peeve, but you do have all your functionality here, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, as well as in mode, which allows you to change things in the car, like where the launch control goes off, your shift light, you can see fluid levels and temperatures, as well as G meters, all that sort of thing. It's a nice little touch to a performance vehicle. But throughout, you have all the nice little in touches like the blue stitching, the blue noting, and these nice, lovely premium option seats, which the lightweight package, which is part of the premium package for the i30, along with the massive, beautiful panoramic sunroof. So how's the back seat in the i30N? Well, luckily it is typical i30, so there's plenty of room throughout, and even with the sport seats, you don't lose much knee or leg room. Toe room, though, is a little bit cramped. A couple of cubbies here and there, as well as a hook for your coat. You have the center armrest, which has your normal cup holders, but you don't have any vents or USB plugs, which is a bit of a letdown. However, you still have access to the sky thanks to this beautiful sunroof. So how's the back of the i30N? Well, to be honest, it's pretty much exactly the same as the i30 inline we had a few months ago on the channel. You do still have a spare tire underneath, and you also have the addition of the chassis brace across the back, which helps keep the nice rear stiff. Now, the problem with the chassis brace is it's cool to look at, but it does keep you from having bigger items if the seats are folded down, so keep that in mind. So what's the tops, bottoms, and final verdict on the 2021 i30N Performance? Well, on the bottom are a few key things to keep in mind, particularly in the super competitive hot hatch market. One is the fact that this new i30 is just a refresh, so there's some tech that hasn't been updated, and the interior doesn't feel quite as premium as some of its competitors. Plus, if you're after something to spend every day with, just remember this car is super stiff, even in normal mode. So what's on top for the i30N? Well, to begin with, it's based on the i30, so it's a pretty well packaged car, and it's mostly easy to live with, especially now that you have the addition of the dual clutch gearbox. It means you're not having to roll your own gears in traffic and makes the car a little bit more city friendly. Also, when you put this thing in sport or in mode, this is an absolute weapon. Easily the sharpest chassis on the market at the moment. So that's my final verdict on the 2021 i30N. Well, if you want a hot hatch with comfort, you buy a GTI. If you want a hot hatch with agility and a bit of flair, you buy a Renault Sport. But if you want objectively the sharpest chassis on the market with a car that's now incredibly well packaged in a brand new transmission, you gotta check out one of these. Hey guys, it's Lee Taylor. That's the 2021 Hyundai i30N Performance, and this is a Right Lane review. Right Lane review. What is wrong with me? Having a stroke today.